A very good morning and afternoon, and also those who are following us, and morning, wherever you are. Welcome to another edition of The Other Perspective. My name is Abel Eseru, and I'm going to be your moderator of the show today. The Other Perspective runs every Wednesday from 11 a.m. East African time, and it's brought to you by Alliance for Finance Monitoring, which is a political finance watchdog. Today we are going to look at the national budget of Uganda for the financial year 2022 to 2023, whether the NRM government learned anything from the previous national budgets they have passed. Before we continue, I would like all our followers outside there and listeners to follow us on all our social media platforms. We are live on Facebook. Facebook is ACFIM. You can like our Facebook page. On Twitter, we are ACFIM You can also follow our Twitter handle. And on LinkedIn, we are ACFIM Uganda. All those platforms are available for you. You can follow us and we continue with our engagements so that we can be having a lively discussion as we continue. As we continue. So before I proceed, I would like to give a brief background on why we chose today's topic and why we find it very interesting. The national budget for financial year 2022/2023 on the 14th of June 2022 was presented by the Minister for Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Honorable Matia Kasaija. The total budget is Uganda shillings 48.1 trillion, which is an equivalent to 12.8 billion US dollars. The theme for this year's budget is full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, and market access. As usual, the projected revenue collection is 21.4 trillion Uganda shillings, which is about 44% of the budget. The remaining 66% is going to be financed through borrowing and grants. This comes in a wake of an already growing public debt stock of Uganda shillings 73.5 trillion, which is an equivalent to 19.5 billion US dollars. This budget comes at the time when the Uganda shillings is depreciating against the dollar by 6.7%, and the inflation rate stands at 6.3%, and we expect it to continue growing. According to the Finance Minister, the budget strategy for the financial year 2022-2023 and over the medium term seeks to restore economic activity to the pre-pandemic levels and subsequently accelerate the pace of socio-economic transformation. So in today's episode, we do an analysis of the national budget to establish whether the NRM government has learned anything from the previous budgets. So I will be joined by three guest panelists who are going to be discussing with me whether the NRM government has learned anything from the previous budget. The first will be Mr. Eddie Kainda, who is an economist and also an educationist. He will bring is an educated economist who has vast knowledge around economics. So I know his knowledge will be of importance as we analyze this national budget. Then we also have Priska Wanyenya, who reports from the Parliament of Uganda, where the members of Parliament did pass this budget. So we know that there are also rumors around that some of them received around 40 million for passing this budget. So she will also give us some of the insights whether this is true or it's just a rumor. And then finally, we have Mr. Henry Muguzi, who is a political finance expert, but also he has that element of public financing and issues of accountability. So he will be able to share with us his knowledge whether this budget really is a true representative of what Ugandans expect and whether it will really achieve the theme as it has been set. So I will start with you, Eddie. What are your reflections of the earnings from the previous budget in relation to the past budget, which stands at Uganda shillings 48.1 trillion?
Thank you, Abel. It's been coming back to this conversation. It's been a long time without being here, and I'm glad you invited me to this conversation. The budget, it's an interesting one. I try to look at the budget from the perspective of the time when Uganda has gotten out of COVID-19, and we are trying to present a budget that is supposed to spur Uganda out of the economic depression that we have had during the COVID-19. But there are a few things that stand out that are quite interesting, but also some disturbing. That are, first of all, our projected revenue is shooting up from previously about 45 trillion to about 48.1 trillion, just like you mentioned. Apparently, that would mean that the economy is expanding. You should have realized that yesterday the minister mentioned that we are now at around 4.6. We are projected to grow at around 4.6, previously at 3.5. By figure terms, that could be an improvement towards the positive. But what really happens on ground could substantially be different, just like we shall see. The second thing I want to point out is that we are seeing a reduction in the amount of money that we are collecting in local revenues. Uganda continues to have a very deficit budget, and about 21.4 trillion shillings shall be collected from the national revenue sources, and that gives it about 4.4%, 44.4% of the total budget, meaning that the remaining percentage is going to be gotten from borrowing, either locally or foreign debts or grants, which is quite disturbing given the fact that we already have a bloated public debt stock at around 73.5 trillion. That is already too high, and at some point, I think we are over indebted, and this tends to suffocate the economy. But also, we shall note that around 34.1 trillion shillings of the national budget is intended to go for current expenditure, like operational expenses in terms of salaries and other operating costs. And of course, this is about over 70% of the total budget. And this means that it leaves us with about between 14 to 15, 16 trillion shillings to ensure that we invest in rural services. Now, when you look at, again, the theme of the budget that looks at monetization of the economy and putting a lot of money in the hands of the public and raising ourselves into the money economy, and only leaving 30% of the total budget into monetizing the economy. I think this is a reverse of what has been stated in the budget yesterday. And to me, we ought to have done better than that. And from my perspective, I really do not expect a lot from this budget. Much as the minister tried to look to put a reflection of our macroeconomic stability in terms of projecting the economy to be stable, I do not think we are stable, and we ought to do better. And the only thing we can do better is to ensure that at microeconomic level, to feed into the macroeconomy, people are doing well, business is doing well, which I do not see happening in this budget speech that the minister read on behalf of the president. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you, Eddie. Priska, it seems you've heard Eddie. It seems Eddie has an opinion that it seems NRM government has not learned anything from the past budgetary processes. And the same thing we are also seeing here. They are budgeted, but in real terms, as if nothing is going to happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks so much. I think from the very word go, especially when you touch on the issue of the resource envelope, the revenue collections, there was a projection of 21 trillion to be collected in this current financial year, and they are anticipating to collect 25 trillion in the next financial year. But when you look at the figures on the revenue collections for the past 3 years, we've been registering shortfalls, and even this current financial year, they are projecting a shortfall of about 900 billion. So to me, the budget comes off as a tool that is over ambitious on the side of government, and this is something that even the former Commissioner General of URA complained about, Doris Ako, that the revenue projections are always overambitious on the side of government. And that was the same issue that was raised in the minority report by some members of the opposition. And even we know that even the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, made a joke on our budget recently, mostly on our inability to even fund the recurrent expenditure, because we are projecting to collect about 25 trillion, yet our recurrent expenditure is about 34 trillion. It's over 30 trillion. I'm not so sure of the exact figure. So he made a comment that don't be like our neighbors who cannot even fund the recurrent expenditure, because that means the recurrent usually has items like wages and components. So this is now a government that cannot even pay salaries of its employees. And but if you're running a home and you're not even in position to get a salary to pay even your mates, it shows a lot about your finances, your financial capabilities. And when you realize yesterday when Kasaija was presenting a budget, when he hinted on the money that is coming from the World Bank for Women Entrepreneurs, he pleaded with women to use the money well, saying so that it does not go back abroad to borrow, and they chase him out. He cited an example of a country he went to borrow, and they told him, "You old man, go back to Uganda." So for him, it might have come as a joke to him, but it shows you it is sending a message. Probably even is the international community fed up of lending to Uganda, because if you're in position to send away the finance minister, you old man, go back to Uganda. And when you look at the budget, the public debt is around 73 trillion. So that gives you a glimpse of the financial crisis that the country is in, and within which the budget is operating. And I was also disappointed in the fact that the agriculture sector, because agriculture has been lumped together with industrialization, I think their budget has been cut by about 500 billion, and part of that money is the payment of seedlings for coffee, UCD, and everything. So, and when you look at statistics from Mobos, mostly on the issue of the subject of poverty, they highlighted that some Ugandans slid back into poverty, and some of them went into agriculture as a backup plan. So this is the sector that we thought, and alongside industrialization, that we thought would hope to spark growth, but we see its budget being cut. And instead now, from the rhetoric from government, they are putting more emphasis now on security, and they are using the instability, the instability in Karamoja region now to justify the heavy investment in security. And I think and the other in point of insecurity they are using is the DRC, the deployment. And I think recently it was revealed that each day the UPDF is spending about over 200 million in DRC, its deployment. I think after the commercial break I'll get the figures. So that is, that is the money that the country is spending in DRC every day for the time we've been there. And you realize that the what? The deployment was extended. The two nations agreed to extend the deployment. So some economists have argued against the issue of heavily funding the security sector at the expense of health and education. But I do not see that this trend reducing anytime soon. And I think also the opposition also raised an issue on the classified expenditure, because the budget keeps on growing, and there is limited accountability on how that money is spent. I think they had asked for about 2 trillion on 2 trillion on classified, and they have approved about 1.5. And so the worry is that the classified expenditure is the new conduit that some people are using to siphon money for public. They those are the things that I usually I saw on the budget. So on the common man's perspective, I think when we're discussing the state of nation last week, we raised the issue on the lengthy speech that the government gave. I was shocked this time the president used was kept to the point. So within the 90 minutes, they told him that the concentration span for the what, for the youth. As a layman, I thought that was an improvement from the usual environment that we've been accustomed to in the. I hope he keeps up with the spirit.
Thank you, Priska. Henry, I now want to bring you. You have just listened to Priska and Eddie give their views on the reflections of the learnings from the previous budgets in relation to the presented budget of 48.1 trillion. What do you make of this, and what do you think the current regime or the NRM government has learned anything from the way they have been budgeting for this country from the previous years?
Thank you, Abel. Good question. Has this government learned anything? Is it even on record to learn anything? That remains to be answered. But when you look at the budget that was presented, you see that, as always, they have dedicated about 11% of the budget to security. And then, of course, they keep insisting that, you see, security is the bedrock of economic growth. If you're going to sustain yourself in lower middle income country, there must be security. There is a sense in which they have interpreted narrowly the word security to mean absence of war. But like we know it, security doesn't merely mean absence of war. Can you be secure when you have nothing to eat? Can you be at peace when you don't have a job? Because people have been thrown out of employment. The markets have been taken. Are those at peace? Even us who are elitist, for some of us who work in the civil society world, they suspended the biggest development partner in democratic governance facility. That virtually rendered people unemployment. Can you be at peace when you are unemployed? The people that were feeding and surviving off the employees of these organizations that were accessing funds from the DGF, are they at peace? Can you be at peace when you have been evicted from your land by land grabbers? And then they keep buying mortars and katyushas. Did COVID need a katyusha? And then you see that that they continue to allocate the lion's share of the budget to defense. This time around, it is 11%. I think they've not learned anything. And then you look around how much they have allocated to health. About 5.6 trillion, I think, which boils down to 7.7%. And the Abuja declaration requires that state parties should allocate 15% of their budgets to health. Have they learned anything? I would argue that not. And then you go around the theme, they have talked about modernization, and their special purpose vehicle for modernization is for monetization of the economy, because they got monetization is the parish development model, to which they have allocated 1.1 trillion. And then I can see here, I think 1 trillion to parish development model, then 200 billion to SMEs. You know, I don't know why they have forgotten the micro enterprises, because I don't see the micro enterprises written anywhere. They assume all of them are small and medium, but those micro, because small enterprises are those that are recruiting up from 50, medium hundreds, whatever. But there are those micros that are recruiting and employing about 10 people, 8 people. Those I don't see them catered for, but that said, and then the money they have allocated to, if you combine the money, add up the money they have allocated for parish development model, which is their special purpose vehicle, and then you see how much they have allocated to SMEs, 200 billion, and then the 51 billion, it boils down to 1.7 trillion. But security has 5.2. So should your theme not have been securitization? Because when you say monetization, we expect to see you allocating more. But on monetization, it is 1.7 trillion. On securitization, it is 5. I mean, it is 11. It's 5.2 trillion. So that they didn't get. Now, the other thing is about agriculture. This is the backbone of the country. How much have they allocated to agriculture? A paltry 564 billion to the backbone of the economy. Are they learning anything? Is there any learning here? I would submit that no. And then you move on to tourism, which has been projected and guerrilla marketed as a major source of foreign exchange. How much have they allocated to tourism? 194.7 billion. Can you expect to milk and pull out a whole liter, 20 liters of milk from a cow which you are not feeding? I think you cannot milk a cow you are not feeding. If you want to milk a cow, first feed it, it will give you milk. So there is under budgeting in that aspect. And then, of course, we go down to the part to the whole issue of how much have they allocated to the local governments. Because you see, it's at local government level where the rubber touches the ground. The local governments are the conduits for service delivery. This is where you reach the person you want to drag into middle income status. They have allocated about 5 trillion.
5.1 trillion.
5.1 trillion. On the surface of it, you can say, oh, that is about 10% of the budget, but that's not the essence. Okay? The French call it the pièce de résistance. The whole subject matter of this, the pièce de résistance here is how much is going into each local government. You have a local government like my own little Masaka getting 18 billion for 12 months. And yet, if you compute how much they have shared with the 40 million they have just gotten the handshake, They have on just a handshake of MPs that passed the supplementary budget, which was querying State House by allocation of 77 billion. The total is 21 billion on just handshake of MPs. But you give my little Masaka, one of the most populated districts, 18 billion for 12 months? Are you kidding me? And then you, on average, you see local government districts are getting 25, 32. We want to see a big chunk of the national budget allocated to local governments, because what they have allocated there, now if my little Masaka gets 18 billion, it means therefore that about 80%, and Priska, you bear me witness on this one, about 80% is going to go into payment of salaries, fuel, those current expenditures. So for development, you have less than 20%, about 18. Are we talking about moving to the middle income status? Is this government learning anything? I think they have learned nothing and they have forgotten nothing. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you, Henry. Eddie, you with your economic lenses, I want you to help us with this, the way the government is planning to monetize the economy. It has earmarked 1 trillion for the Paris Development Model, 200 billion for the small and medium-sized enterprises, and then it has allocated 51 billion to Uganda Development Bank for the private sector. You are an economist and you've seen the theme: monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services. How feasible is this ambition? Is the allocation of only 1 trillion, 200 billion, and then 51 billion? How feasible is it in achieving a monetized economy?
For this, now, I want us to educate ourselves on this. In the history of Uganda, credit has not yielded any developmental outcome at either national level or at community level or at local government level, because the construction of Ugandans is not wired towards taking and accepting credit as a form of business monetization. The consumptive nature of Ugandans dictates that any money given in credit is used for consumption rather than investment. We have gotten to the level of where we get money from credit, say in banks, and the money is used for consumptive reasons, including weddings and marrying wives and drinking alcohol, and that's it. And it even makes it worse when we come from COVID-19, that the demand for money, the demand for cash is high, and that any substantial money that comes into the hands of the population is taken for consumption rather than investment. But that notwithstanding, we look at the increased rate of borrowing or lending a community, a citizenry that is not economically organized. Most Ugandans have not mobilized themselves into either VSLAs or circles or economic groups. And that means that there has not been any structured intention for these people to borrow money and use it for constructive reasons. And the mistake government has always done is to think that we shall power in money like they are going to do for the Paris Development Model, for the EMIOGAs and the SME grants through the SME money through the Development Bank, and think that this money is going to fall on fertile ground. This money is falling on infertile ground because Ugandans are not prepared economically. They are not prepared in training terms. They're not prepared in terms of business appraisals to receive and use this money in investment. That is number one. Number two, when the budget talks about monetization of the economy, it is also going back to increase the central bank rate. Remember that the central bank rate has been increased by the Bank of Uganda, meaning that Ugandans are getting credit at a higher cost from the banks. Today, if you're going to get a loan from any commercial bank, for example, you're going to get it at 36%. That is about 3% per month. The cost of doing business is so high. Therefore, when you intend to monetize the economy, again, you don't increase the central bank rate or the cost of receiving money from financial institutions and say you're monetizing the economy. Thirdly, when you look at the cost of doing business today, whereas most Ugandans were intended to invest post COVID-19, we have private sector tells us that we are looking at many businesses cropping up from micro, medium, small, and large, but with 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 businesses survive. What does that mean? That the cost of doing business is high, apparently because of the high taxes, because of the high cost of fuel and other inputs towards and factors of production, meaning that businesses cannot survive. What the budget could have done was to lessen the cost of factors of production to make it more conducive for Ugandans to do what? To acquire money for investment. Thirdly, when you look at Emyoga and the Uganda Development Bank monies that micro SMEs are supposed to receive from commercial banks, whereas the government of Uganda subsidized this money by 10%, meaning that persons that are acquiring this money are supposed to get it at 10%. The commercial banks are also sharks and are sucking the little blood remaining out of the Ugandans by making the criteria so stringent. I was in one of the commercial banks and owned by government, trying to see how easy is it for a business to get money. They require an informal business to have structured into a semi-formal business with structures, with accounts, with bank accounts, with all requirements that a formal institution or a formal business would have done. Now, given the fact that in Uganda, almost 60 to 70% of the businesses are informal, that money still lies idle. There are very, very few organizations businesses that have gone to commercial banks to receive this money. That tells you that government is giving at one hand and then giving out at another from another hand. Therefore, that will not help in monetizing the economy, like the minister is mentioning. But most importantly, when you look at the parish development model, my experience from the parish development model, the first batch of the money was released about 1 month ago. Each of the parish was given about 17 million shillings to pretest how the parish development model works. I happened to be in the community when the parish chief came around to test how this money would be given. The VSLA was formed on that day. The very basic training and sensitization about how the model is going to work was done in that very day. People's national IDs were taken to register them in the PDM book. And the construction of the public is that they are going to, this money does not come in circles, but it is going to come in handouts per village, per household. The construction of government is that people are supposed to form themselves into enterprises. And these enterprises shall make circles and the money shall be given in circles. And this money is supposed to be revolving. The revolving nature of credit is not the construction of the beneficiaries. And for them, they think that if the money comes, what they're going to do is to pick money and give to Abel, to give to Patra, give to Henry, and we use it for whatever business you want to use it for. In an economy that is aimed at monetizing, the only thing they could have done is entrepreneurial development. In countries that are developed using this model, countries like South Korea, countries like China, countries like the Asian tigers, they use local and indigenous knowledge. The president mentioned to us that already in the middle income economy, Middle income economy means that each one of us, according to him, is getting about 3.7 million shillings per annum. That money is enough if it was used on an entrepreneurial basis to spark a household from a subsistence household to a money economy household. But that is not happening, and it is filled with a lot of inequalities. I was in one of the communities where down in the east, where I interacted with households that have not earned more than 10,000 shillings in a year, and they are swimming in poverty. They are swimming in deprivation. They are shattered. They are battered by poverty. Such kind of economy, such kind of community, even if you give them money, they're not going to think of monetizing. They're going to think of consumptive purposes. So let us try to think about the basics. First of all, are our people food secure? Secondly, are they economically organized? Thirdly, are they trained? Fourthly, is there any business they can handle within their local knowledge within the community? Are they appraised and trained to get that? Such that when you're bringing that PDM, you are not giving a startup, you're already pushing into a business that is existing. That is how economy works. That's how economics works. It does not work from credit. It does not work with startups. It works with entrepreneurialism and indigenous knowledge. Thank you, Albert.
Thank you so much, Eddie. We are going to go for a break, but before we go, I think Eddie's arguments are so interesting. Economics that works, I think, can't apply in Uganda. It's politics that works. So let's first go for the break, then we shall return.
Thank you.
Something is wrong. No one is coming to me. Nobody is minding about me. No one is yearning to see me. Hey? What is the problem?
Then we should go before they come.
Are you mad? I changed all this money for them. I want them to ask. I want to give them all this money, but no one is minding.
What should I do? How do I carry?
You go there and tell them to. You go. No. You just go. Talk to them one by one.
Hey, what has happened?
Exactly. Thank you for coming. You know, this whole place has changed. What is the matter?
What is it exactly?
No one is yearning to see me. Nobody is minding. No one is asking for money. Nothing.
Oh, is that what you mean? No. Honorable, let me tell you this.
Yes.
Things changed.
Changed?
Yes. As we, your campaigning managers, we agreed that we need parliamentarians, our honorable MPs, who present issues in parliament.
So is that what you decided?
That's what we decided.
The desire of any progressive democracy is to have citizens who focus on issue-based politics and not transactional politics, which suffocates representative democracy.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate.
Welcome back from that break. Today we are trying to make an analysis of the national budget of Uganda for the financial year 2022 to 2023, which was presented yesterday, 14th of June 2022. Before we went for a break, Eddie was giving us his view on concerning how the government plans to monetize the economy. And one thing I picked is that this government does not look at economics that works. They look at politics that works. And I want to bring in Henry. What do you make of a country a government that wants to move towards politics that works and ignores more of the economics that works?
So thank you, Abel. We live in a country whose distortion would appear to be beyond comprehension. And the reason I'm saying that is this country is forgetting that some of us lived and saw what our parents and village mates were doing before it came to power. I was living, I think I was in P6 when they took power. Now, but I had seen on my village, there was no such a time when you received seeds, cassava cuttings, goats, never mind how crooked they are, from government. You see, you cannot develop an economy, propel people into middle income status using handouts. In fact, handouts is a mechanism that cripples the innovation, the thinking, the development of the people. This government comes and they come up with their new strategy, new idea of crippling the minds of Ugandans by giving them seeds, even cassava cuttings. I was on my village. Do you know that people, even cassava cuttings, they are waiting for nuts and this whatever to give them? So how do you drive a country into that? And because of that model, then they've been doing handouts, throwing money at people. Now they are coming up with the PDM model, throw money at the people. What do we want? Are models that have been proven to work. If today we are suffering, the world is suffering because Ukraine and Russia, which are at war, are producing a third of the world's wheat and barley. But you see, why don't we look at the model of Ukraine? Because in Ukraine and Russia, if you are a farmer that's progressive and you have your land, then you benefit from subsidies such as you can acquire a subsidized combine harvester. You can acquire subsidized equipment and machinery for irrigation. You acquire subsidized fertilizers, and when you are harvesting, government plays a role. Today we are talking about central food repositories of Ukraine, which Russia is banning. Some of it is looting. It's because the state has played a role. In Uganda, the government has abandoned everything. In my own language, we can call us Ugandans Bwana Bwambata, which would mean the young of a duck, because you know the duck by their very nature, they don't look after the young ones. You cannot have economics where you have completely abandoned and playing no role as a government. So I think the economics doesn't work. Even when they brought a man that was prophesying economics that doesn't work, the moment he entered the office of permanent secretary, I think he breathed something and drank something. He no longer talks about the things now because he's fitting into exactly what the others were doing. So for this thing to work, you ask them the question, okay, supposing like Eddie was saying, Ugandans are not used to this money you borrow and pay back. But supposing they are, and they successfully use it, and production in 2023 reaches unprecedented levels, where are you going to take the production? You government, do you have the people that are going to buy it at a rate which would be profitable? Because what we've seen over the years is that at harvest time, the kilogram of maize drops to as low as 100 shillings. Your government, which is propelling this parish development model, do you have a strategy? Because you've not seen it in the budget. How are you going to buy this production to ensure that farmers are not exploited and they don't suffer from the vagaries of excessive supply? There are no strategy. So what kind of budget is this that only looks at one side of production and forgets that there will be another side after they have produced? What are you going to do with the produce? I think these are things we have to look into. And so as it is now, you don't get that clearly, and of course it's surprising. Back to you, Abel.
Thank you, Henry. I want now to bring Priska. Priska, you report from Parliament, and you just I know you've scrutinized the budget, and out of the 48 trillion Uganda shillings, which budget that was passed and presented yesterday, 34 trillion Uganda shilling, which constitutes 70.7%, will go into recurrent expenditure. That is wages, rent, allowances, fuel, food, hotel service, among others. This leaves us Uganda with only about 14 trillion Uganda shillings for development. You were just promised the other week. You were informed the other week that we are now into a middle income status. Do you think when we have only 14 trillion Uganda shillings, we can sustain economy in the so-called middle income status? I mean the country, not the economy.
Thanks so much, Abel. And it's the point that I hinted on relation to the remarks that Kenya's president made, that our current expenditure is 34 trillion, and we are anticipating to collect about 25. That is the anticipation. It's not that all the 25 will be collected. And so he was mocking our economy to the extent that we cannot even sustain our own budget. We cannot fund our own budget. And you realize that under that recurrent expenditure, I think the wage bill has grown from 5 trillion to now 7 trillion. So it keeps on expanding. And it is something that has raised issues within the public, mostly when you look at our debt. Because why you look at the 34 trillion on the recurrent expenditure, you should also, when you look at that budget very well, you're talking of remaining with 14 trillion, but you know that a big chunk of that money also is going towards debt repayment, because debt repayment has a big component. I think it has the majority component among the service sector. And it is something that has raised concern within the public, especially among the economists, that the situation, the fiscal discipline within government is worsening, because you have a government that is urging Ugandans to tighten their belts because of the economic crisis within the global economic crisis. And when Kasaija was presenting the budget yesterday, he was frank and said the government is not going to intervene in commodity prices because his argument was it is likely to have long-term effects on Uganda's economy. The government has literally surrendered the situation to, let me say, to God, for those who believe, and they are acting like their hands are tied. And for us, when you're gonna ask them to intervene in commodity prices, they're expecting government to do the simple things like control on your spending. Let the spending go on production areas. So that is why when you look at the Ugandans who are angry at the fact that Parliament is spending all that money in the procurement of cars, of course, the two speakers, we all know that the cars are procured after 5 years, and it was their entitlement. But why this has caused the uproar is the procurement process and the timing within which you are the same people who are asking Ugandans to reduce on their expenditure. You tighten their belts. You've not even given them the belts to tighten themselves in the first place. But you're not leading by example. One thing that government has failed to do throughout this time is leading by example. And this is screaming around in the in the budget. For one thing that we know is at Parliament, we were even shocked when we realized that the budget committee went to Serena Chigo. I think they were there for about 3 to 5 days to write a report for the budget. But for the past 5 years that I've been at Parliament, at no time did we see the committee camp in any hotel to write a report, because there is nothing special about this report that would warrant you camping in Serena Chigo. And because now when I try to calculate the rates at Serena Chigo, they were crazy. I can't recall the figure, but when you look at and it was not only the period when they were in Serena Chigo, they were not the only ones. I think there was also the finance committee that was writing a report on the tax bills. Then there was also the health committee. So there were 3 committees camped. And these committees are they have about 35, an average of 35 members. And for travel inland for MPs, their per diem is about 450. You see that? Yeah, they are giving me rates yet. So then you catering for, because when the MPs go, they go with some staff of parliament. The staff of parliament, you go with the clerk, you go with a police analyst, you go with an economist, you go with some 2 police for security and a driver. So all the staff are paid about 250 per diem, and I think the police is paid about 150. I'm not so sure about the rates, but I'm giving you a glimpse of what it means when a committee of parliament camps at a hotel to write a report on the budget, yet you're the same people who are telling Ugandans that tighten your belts, control your spending. And I do not know about the areas that you people stay in, but I do know that the Ugandans have tried to control their spending. There is actually the situation has brought even the misunderstanding in public. You always hear this talk that in Uganda, in Kampala, you are the only one who is broke. So even if Abel tells me he's broke, he might tell me he's broke, and the next thing I know, he's bringing in a Porsche car. So that is the reason as to why people are saying. So you're driving in the traffic, or you're seated in a taxi, and you see a Porsche car coming. You're like, you don't even have what you're going to eat, literally, or you're even walking. So that is why people argue that in Kampala or in Uganda, you're the only one who is broke. So we don't trust our fellow broke mates. So that issue is something that really disturbed me. That I asked myself, what was special about this budget that would warrant? Because the only issue is that when you bring these policy statements from education committee, you lump them, then that is what forms the budget. Then the tax bill. So there isn't much that the budget committee is doing, because it's like most of the work has already been done by the sectoral committees. So it is something that was hypocritical of government on their side, that I think the budget committee alone could have spent about 300 million. When you should try to calculate that figure, and you see in Serena Chigo. So you can imagine what that money would have done if it was placed in the budget. I know it could. Some people would think 300 million is little money, but it would have done. So I think I say our time is up. So I think when you look at our topic today, it shows that government has not learned anything, and it is not about to learn anything about the running over our budget. We have asked them to control, to be frugal on their expenditure and everything, but it's like all these pleas are falling on dead ears. So it is not shocking that the budget comes out the way it is, because even the politicians who are in charge of the budget, they are looking out for their own interests. What is my constituency getting?
Thank you, Priska. I want to bring Eddie. Eddie, you've just had Priska when she was on this issue of how we are going to spend 70.7% of the national budget on recurrent expenditure. What are your thoughts? You are an economist. Do you think a country should spend 70.7% of the total national budget?
You see, Abel, in business, there is what we call business as a going concern. Going concern means that you must survive in the nearest foreseeable future. If a country like Uganda, if we relate Uganda to be a business, and you are spending 70% on operations and recurrent expenses, and they're using only 30% to invest, if you are a business, you would collapse. This is exactly what happened in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is normal. The country is in the rocks, people are up in the arms. You remember what happened in Zimbabwe when people came on the streets because of a hyperinflation that happened because of such kind of issues. We have focused so much on expenditure and we have not thought of investment. Countries, economies grow through investment. Economies do not grow through consumption. The president hinted about infrastructure development, but even when this infrastructure development is done, the president ought to have done this in the last 20 years. He's doing it in the evening of his presidency, and probably he might not even live to see the benefits of these investments. What I'm trying to come up to is that we needed to allocate monies towards investment in human capital, investment in skills, investment in employment opportunities, among others, ensure that we grow the economy. When URA gets shortfalls in collection, it is self-made because you cannot collect from where you have not invested. 90% of Uganda's taxes is collected in urban centers that constitute about only 10% of the population that is supposed to pay taxes. Now, such is not sustainable. The president would, the budget would have aimed at ensuring that they focus on the inequalities that are so wider between a person who does in business in Kampala and a person who does business down in Chanamkaka. And you can see that the budget is doing less. This budget, the previous 5 budgets also, they have not done so much to lessen that gap. And that can only be done if we reduce on current expenses and focus on investment. There is a saying, as I conclude, that goes like, equality is in the mouth, and that the grave of a hen is different from the grave of a dog. That whereas the grave of the dog is a saucepan, the grave of a hen is a saucepan. The grave of a dog is on a tin tree in Uganda called a jirikiti. So this is what is happening. So some of us are in the saucepan, others are somewhere in heaven enjoying it. You know, if we do not do investment, then that cannot happen. In Uganda, it means that Henry will understand that is that you know, the entana yembwa si ekimu n'entaana y'enkoko. Entaana y'enkoko sefuliya ate entaana yembwa jirikiti. And that is what is exactly happening in Uganda. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Eddie. I know our time has run out, but I will extend for like 10 minutes so that we can conclude on this. Henry, you are an and you are anti-corruption activists. And we have seen the government, so as to enhance anti-corruption drive, has allocated 1.4 trillion Uganda shillings amongst all those other agencies and sectors that try to do work around corruption. Does this indicate that government now has the political will to fight corruption?
Abel, of course, and when you say government, I think we need to be specific here. It is the NRM government. Because so that our viewers can understand, it's the regime of the NRM that we have in office that has failed squarely on fighting corruption. The best thing they have done is to be complicit in propagating corruption. So no wonder when we look at the budget, you get to see, we had the minister reporting that last financial year they were only able to recover 3 billion. But he's now dedicated, he's allocated 79.4 billion to the Inspectorate of Government. He did not mention how much he has allocated to the State House anti-corruption thing, because that one is not illegal. Is a kangaroo thing. But also he's dedicating 300 billion to the judiciary, about 95 billion to the DP, the Director of Public Prosecution. You invest about 1 trillion to recover 3 billion. Does not make economic sense. But let me make a rejoinder on the issue Eddie was sharing. I think this government, the one thing that we have not seen is how much the minister has allocated to payment of arrears of the private sector that have supplied goods and services to government. Because I do know of companies who have not been paid for now 5 years. We did not hear that statement. Pay up the arrears of the private companies that have supplied goods and services to you, NRM government. But also, we did not see a deliberate attempt to channel money towards the activities that would trigger aggregate demand, activities that would increase gross domestic product. We did not see this. And so how are we going to keep in what you are telling us we are in middle income status when you've not deliberately put the things here? Eddie talked about the Sri Lanka case, and of course, as he was sharing about Sri Lanka, I was able to draw parallels between Sri Lanka and Uganda. And Sri Lanka now is a basket case of an economy. Because in Sri Lanka, you have a ruling family. The president is his brother is the prime minister. His other brother is the minister of finance. The wife is the head of the treasury. You see, the son is heading the government institutions. So you see what and the profligacy in spending, the wastefulness, like Priska was sharing earlier. You are telling us to tighten our belts, but you, the state, you are not. We are seeing the types of vehicles you are buying for the speaker. We are seeing how much you are spending on the handshake of the MPs that passed your questionable supplementary budget 50 days ago. We are seeing you paying refunds to MPs that sat at Kololo yesterday. Fuel refund to come back to Parliament, 200,000. Is this how a leader worth the title and the name should superintend over things? So when you are telling us to tighten our belts, what are you tightening? Are you leading by example? Are you a leader or are you a misleader? So I think these are some of the things we need to look at, and of course, a lot remains to be seen. But in terms of learning, the regime of NRM has learned nothing and forgotten nothing. But we can only pray that the Holy Spirit descends on them so they can start learning a new thing. Thank you, Abel.
Thank you so much, Henry, Eddie, and Priska, for being with us and sharing the national budget that was passed. That was presented yesterday, 14th of June, 2021. We have come to our tail end of today's show. The other perspective always runs from every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 midday East African time. We can continue having the conversation on all our social media platforms. On Facebook, we are ACFIM UG. On Twitter, we are ACFIM UG. On YouTube, we are ACFIM Uganda. Let's continue with the conversation. Keep tweeting, keep sharing your views and comments on also on YouTube and also Facebook. Thank you so much. Let's again meet next week.